I'm Michelle Tyreen Johnson. Welcome to Race Unwrapped, a podcast that unwraps all the ways race affects our world, whether we're thinking about it or not. My guest this episode is Professor Regina Hamilton-Townsend. She's in the English department and the African and African American Studies department at the University of Kentucky. We're talking about a word that is so potent, people know what you mean when you just say its first letter. That's right, the N-word. And warning, this is not an episode you want to listen to if you have sensitive ears listening, because we use the whole word, including the cultural variations. And we also say a couple of other words you probably wouldn't ordinarily hear on the radio. This is Race Unwrapped. I'm Michelle Tyreen Johnson, and my guest this episode is Professor Regina Hamilton-Townsend, who's at the University of Kentucky. We will be talking very, let's say, vividly about the N-word. Okay, we don't use euphemisms. We use the whole word several times. So this is the last exit sign warning before the podcast starts and we get into a conversation that will be harsh to some ears.
My name is Regina Hamilton-Townsend. I'm an assistant professor in the English department at the University of Kentucky. I'm also duly appointed in the African American and Africana Studies program. And I am Black or African American. I'm not one of those people who, gets really upset about the difference between those things. I understand they mean different things. But if you call me Black, I'm not going to fight you. And if you call me African American, I'm not going to fight you, right?
Exactly. I always say I'm Black because Black is more of a descriptor than anything.
Yes.
There's no land of Black. Just like when you call somebody white, there's no land of white. So it's a shorthand for, what you is and what you ain't.
Yeah, Black is fine with me, you know what I mean?
And not all Black people are from Africa. That's the whole
Exactly.
thing. But you try having those conversations with people. So what we about to talk about for a little bit is, whenever you start talking about language and race, Regina, how many times do we have to hear and see white people argue for the right to say the word nigger, nigga, whichever, however they want to end that word?
It's forever. They will be doing that forever.
Why? What do you think that's about?
I think that's about power. I think that is, we live in a nation where whiteness was basically a ticket to do whatever you want, right? Or at least that was the belief, right? That was the deal. Even early America, when, African Americans were just freed from the bonds of slavery, or if, even when there were people were still enslaved and there were poor whites who were not faring much better than even the enslaved people, right? Their whiteness was made into a currency that allowed them, at the very least, power over African Americans. And one way in which you wield that power is through speech, right? And so to tell a white person, particularly an American white person, that they cannot say something is so opposite and so we don't live in a world where that's understandable. They feel that all of the space is theirs, all the language is theirs. And so, because language is just one more system, right, that wraps around bodies and puts in, situates people in time and space. And so every system in America, white people of any class feel like they should be able to wield that system in their favor. And so to say, hey, you can't say that, that is just unimaginable. Right.
Oh my God. It's so true. I came into this podcast today just a little bit ticked because dealing with an email from I won't say what he does, but let's just say a person who was formerly in charge of my living experience. You say land, I say Lord, landlord. And he walked up to a very dubious line in how he addressed me in a conversation we were having by email, and I was saying just what you just said to my best friend, because I'm black, she's black, and we were like, the power folks think that they have when you are black, especially if they don't know anything about you, right? So
Exactly.
they've already put you in a certain category just because they think they know your name, I mean your race.
Yes.
And that just doesn't change.
Which is so wild. I mean, because like I don't like walk up to the average white person thinking I know anything about them, except for maybe that they might not be able to dance as well as I am, and that is occasionally proven wrong, right? Like
Right?
I don't walk up to the average white person thinking like I know something fundamental about them specifically due to their whiteness.
Yes.
And that I have some kind of like inherent power over them, and that it is my right to use that power. And that in itself is so problematic, right?
But that's the thing. That's the thing, right? We live in a society now where equity and equality seem to be threatening because what if I'm equal to you, you view that as being superior to you because you're used to me being subordinate to you?
I mean, but the leveling out of power always feels like a loss to the people who have all the power.
Ooh, you about to make me preach up in here. Okay.
I'm just, same thing with money. Money is just a stand up for power too. But if you like took all the billionaires and you like spread that money out, let's say you just spread it out globally, like every person in the world gets the same amount of money, right? They would take that as an extreme and unfair and like unmitigated loss, right? Like they have no other way to conceptualize that other than loss, right?
Right.
Because like equity is for people who don't have all the power.
As a black person, as a black woman, as an educated black woman, you and I both know that all of those things are an issue in what people think they can get away with saying, right? Like they're making all these, back to your point about you don't walk up to people and make assumptions about who they are merely because they're standing there. But how often do people freely do that? Which is why I think the whole N word is such a debate, because it's like, why, as a white person, are you fighting so hard to say the word nigger? Why are you fighting so hard to say that?
Because, they still believe it's true. I mean, that's the real. You know what I mean? Like, they feel like they should be able to say it because they feel like they still have the same amount of power.
So that reminds me, when I see somebody over the years making that argument on social media, my new response to them is, that's cool. You can say the word whenever you want to. But if you can't say it in my neighborhood out loud, you don't need to say it in your neighborhood out loud.
That's how I feel too. My thing is, my kind of like short and fast rule is like, if you have never been called one,
right,
or had anybody looking in your face like they wanted to call you one,
right,
then you probably shouldn't be saying it.
Exactly.
Like that, I just think that's a hard if you think about the reclamation of like any slur, that's pretty much the rule, right? Like,
absolutely.
Gays and women have reclaimed bitch. I probably say bitch about as much as I say nigga, and it's a lot.
It's about who you are to the person who you're saying it to, right?
Exactly.
So if me and you were girls and we out having, and I have a feeling you and I could be girls. So,
I have a feeling too. I was like, we need to hang out.
We need to hang out. Let's do this, right? But if you and I at a happy hour or something, and I'm about to order my second drink, and you like, girl, you sure you want to order this? Well, bitch, look, Okay? Me saying that to you is not. Same thing with the word nigger versus nigga. Nigga,
Right.
what that boy, who you talking to like that? Okay? Like totally different connotation because of our relationship to one another.
Yes. And it's all about like power relations, right? So
Yes.
it's like if the power relations are equal on all levels, then those terms don't hit the same, right?
Yes.
I mean, but I never say nigger with the hard ER 'cause that's weird to me. But
Oh
you know,
my
I know people
God.
who do.
I don't know. It's so funny because nigga, black person to black person can be for some of us a form of just merely affection, like
Yes,
again, a woman calling another woman who they have that relationship with, a form of affection. Again, because it's about relationship. Like I'm not going to say to my boss, you know, look, bitch, even affectionately, because she's still my
exactly.
boss, right?
I don't ever say something like that to my colleagues, my bosses, my students, like nothing. Like that is
No.
those are personal relationship terms, right? But it's also a privilege to believe that you have like that you can just like break people. It's always like people outside the group who think they can break into the group by using those kinds of terms, and you can't. Like those terms are not the thing that get you in the group. You have to be in the group to even deploy them. Like, you know what I'm saying?
And you
like,
better right, and you better deploy it. You better deploy it real carefully, even if you in that group. And like
exactly.
and you also probably know that the the set of rules is that even if I let you get away with that, which I don't personally let any white people get away with that in my world,
No,
but
no, me
even
neither.
right, but even if I weren't, as soon as another white person enters the room, then you better not
It's a
even
wrap then.
look.
Yeah, for real, for real.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
not even friends with any white people who would want to say that.
No, me
Like,
either.
there might be some white people who think we're friends. We are not friends if you even cross your to even pretend.
Ooh, I'm just laughing. I'm just laughing at the thought because okay, so let's talk about another word, language. So, and in the conversation about the language of race, sometimes things can have a racial connotation, even if it's not directly racial. I'll give you an example, and you'll know exactly what I mean. It's like if you don't know a white woman well enough, it's a very, like, surface, you just met and she goes, "Girl."
Mm.
As a black woman, what do you think about that?
It depends on the context, right?
Mhm.
Like, because I'm also like from the South, and so white people calling 80-year-old men boy, and 65-year-old women girl is a thing that a part
Mhm.
of me always like the alert starts going off inside, like just a
Mhm.
siren inside my soul, like, oh shit, we might be in the wrong type of place here, like.
Yes.
But my hackles start rising. I'm like, oh man, I don't even got on my good shoes with the good grip. I might have to fight in here. Like,
Right.
I'm a whole ass academic. I can't call home and tell my mom I just got in trouble for fighting. Like, like that's how I
Right.
feel. Like, but then if she's just trying to be like funny and cute, then I'm just like, it's just one of those things that gives you pause.
That's
You
it.
know?
That's it. It's a pause thing, and again, the longer I've known you, the less it bothers me, right?
Right.
Like pretty much most of my white girlfriends could say, "Girl," you know, and I wouldn't blink because they got it like that with me. It's just when that random white person, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase, that random white woman think that, she down with me like that, like,
Well, see, but that's the problem, right? Like, so all these terms, bitch, girl, nigga, all these terms, they connote or denote, right, a level of intimacy,
mm,
and most people, like, you can't. I mean, because think about like, so there was a basketball game the other day, and Dennis Schroeder, who plays for the Lakers, he was playing. He was like guarding Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie did something, And Dennis Schroeder was like, damn, nigga. And Kyrie lost his fucking mind. Like, they had to separate him. They finally had to, like, eject him. And Dennis Schroeder's like, I don't even know what's happening right now, right? He's like, I'm black, he's black. And the first thing that Kyrie said to him is like, you don't know me like that. Like, don't call me no nigga. You don't know me like that, right? And so that's the real issue at stake here is that, like, white people, because of their location in our society and where they're situated as always being the center, they believe that they have a deeper intimacy with, subjugated and marginalized groups than they do.
Yes.
And so the real problem is that when they start deploying these terms, they getting, like my mama would say, they're getting too familiar.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And for black people and even, for the LGBTQ community, for black people, for women, when people who have a certain kind of power in our society start getting too familiar with you, it is like that's a life and death situation. Like, that's dangerous.
It absolutely is. It's funny you should say that because I remember, like, I'm straight, and I remember when queer became co-opted by the LGBTQ community as their own. They reclaimed it, right? On
all levels, like in mainstream media, in the academy. Like, I took queer theory as a class. Serious reclamation.
I'm just now being able to say queer because I'm 56, so I'm of the age where that you don't call someone that. Like, that's an insult.
Yeah.
That's an insult. Now, having said that, and I know you will feel me on this and will join me in the laughter, I don't ever see there being like a curriculum around nigga studies. I don't ever see there being the reclaim,
No.
the degree in nigga theory, the critical nigga theory in the academy. Like we can claim, we can claim it, but we can only claim it so far.
Well, like that's because nigga has a very complicated relationship to our society. And also, American society has not yet been as honest as it needs to about, like, the fundamentally racist. Like, the fact that America is fundamentally racist, right? In ways that, like, bring death to swaths of people.
I have to interrupt you. Tim Scott said that we are not a fundamentally racist country. So really, I think that you are just really off base with that.
Well, Tim Scott said that because they paid him to, right? Like, and so Twitter was having a whole conversation about, like, how much would they have to pay you for you to get on TV to say that? And I was like, damn, how much would they have to pay me for that?
You'd have to kidnap my mama. And even then...
Yeah, it would have to be something like that. Because I was like, what about $1 million? I was like, no. These days, because of the way the dollar is performing, you can't even live off $1 million.
No.
You can run out of money from $1 million.
And even even if you kidnap my mama, if I talk to her and she's like, I'm good, they're not hurting me, I'd be like, okay.
I know my mama been like, girl, it's fine.
I'd be like, okay, then I can't say that.
The conversation about the N-word always makes me think of my mother, too, because I think she's just old enough to be a boomer. And, because she turned 69 this year.
Oh, and, she's a boomer. Yeah.
And my dad is even older than that. I think he's in a generation before boomers. But she was like...
How old are you?
I'm 35. I just turned 35.
And see, I'm the last year of boomer. So when people say, I mean, I'm young in spirit, but there are certain topics I'm like, yeah, I'm a boomer. My ass is boomer. Next, you're gonna recognize.
You know what? And I am like solidly millennial, and I have just gotten to the age where like people be talking like some issues, and I just be like, you know what? That's some young people shit, and they can argue all they want to. That has nothing to do with me. I'm gonna mind my business.
Right.
Which is a new feeling as a person old enough to have that kind of feeling.
It gets better, girl. It gets better. Trust.
My mom was adamantly against like me using the N-word.
So that's your mother? You said she was against that?
Yes, yeah, that's my mother. I mean, adamantly against it. I mean, like, and it's funny is I always used it anyway, like at school and with my friends, talking shit or whatever. But for her generation, but see, we have a different frame of reference. Like when Martin Luther King died, she had like tanks parked on the end of her street. She's from Nashville, Tennessee. I never experienced that. You know what I'm saying? And so for her, there is no like the hatred and the violence and of that word is so extreme and so unwieldy that it cannot be reclaimed.
Yeah.
And see, people in my generation, I understand that from her point of view, but we have always felt that we had enough power, enough cultural capital, enough cachet, enough discursive power, right, to reclaim that word and make it something different. And I think both of us have been right.
Yeah.
Right. There is a way in which we bandy about that term in personal spaces and interracial spaces that does bespeak a certain level of power of reclamation. However, it still maintains those really intense, violent, prickly edges that can still be wielded against us. And that comes, you know what I mean? And so
I totally get it. I totally get it. Because age-wise, I'm in between you and your mother, and I tend to view the word more your way. Except, again, if it's in the mouth of a white person, then I'm sure you agree with this, then we're talking a whole different conversation. But I mean, one of my favorite excuses that white people like to use for wanting to use the word is, but what if I'm just singing a rap song? I'm like, you know what? Gold Digger is the catchiest song, one of the catchiest songs ever written. Kanye West, despite all of his problems, you wrote one on that one.
Did right, though, yes.
You did write a song, but when we get to the I ain't saying she put the broke nigga, I mean, he right, but you can't sing it.
I mean, so my feeling about this is that for probably a good 15, 16 years, I think every rap song in existence, leaving out the spaces for the bad words. Like, I know it's possible. Like, I have literally done that where I have left out all the words I thought it might get me smacked if I said them. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So that excuse of there used to be a time where, how there were Missy songs where I knew the whole song and could just leave out the words. And especially when she started doing that that fast rap, you know what I mean? And one time my cousin was like, "Yo, what'd you say?" I was like, "Nope, I left it out. You can't get me in trouble." You know what I'm saying? And so to me that just speaks of laziness, but also the fact that white people really do believe that mainstream culture belongs to them. And mainstream music, there have been multiple times when that has not really belonged to them. They have been allowed to have it, but it was never theirs to begin with, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but that's all about ownership. So, we start talking about white people ownership, the conversation gets real reckless, right? Because,
it does.
They feel like they own things that don't belong to them,
So I want to talk about one more thing with you real quick before we get off. What's your thought on the phrase cancel culture? What you think?
So I think it was LeVar Burton. He said he thought it was misnamed, and he said we don't have cancel culture. What we have is consequences culture.
That's just what I
said.
I
believe that. I mean, because that relates to this conversation about the N-word too. So people, I agree with this too. It's you can go ahead and say it. It's free speech. Yeah, you can say it. Now, what happens to you after you say it? Well, that's, you have to deal with the consequences of your words, right? And people conflate those.
Yes,
nobody's
they do.
Saying you cannot literally say, of course you can say it. You shouldn't, right?
Right.
But you can. Now, what happens to you after you do, that's between you and whatever black people are in the area. Right?
Well, and it's so true. And I have to correct something I said earlier when I said that my response to people is, you can say it in my neighborhood, say it in my neighborhood, and then you can say it in yours. Well, I now live in a mostly white neighborhood now, so I gotta up my game in how I phrase that. But
that one, talking about the other neighborhood.
right, exactly. Like, go over to West Louisville and say that. Okay, say it real loud. Say it, say it with your chest. Say it with your chest, okay? And if you're not willing to do that, then why are you trying to say it with your people, especially if you saying it anyway? Because I think that what happens with all these conversations about why can't white people say the N-word is I think it ends up being, back to the PowerPoint, a permission thing. Like, that's why the Tim Scotts of the world are paid well, because it's like, if a black person said this, then I'm allowed to say something without having consequences.
I mean, and so my question, so, and they say, well, why can't a white person say the N-word? It's like, well, why do you want to?
Yes.
Like, knowing the history of that word, knowing, the fact that, like, black people, we have barely been able to reclaim that word ourselves. Why do you want in on that?
Thank you.
Like, that's the question to me, not why can't white people say it, but why do they continue wanting to?
I don't get
And I think
it.
that's connected to, like, this, like, virulent stream of racism that flows through American society on all levels.
That was Professor Regina Hamilton-Townsend in the English department and the African and the African American Studies department at the University of Kentucky. This was our last podcast episode of the season, and I want to thank you all for supporting me, our guests, and Louisville Public Media. If you want to share your feedback about the season, or give me an idea about what you'd like to see next season, or just say hello, email me at raceunwrapped@louisvillepublicmedia.org. Or you can follow me on Twitter. My handle there is Diva of Diversity, all one word. I'm Michelle Tyreen Johnson. Thanks for listening to Race Unwrapped.
Race Unwrapped is produced by Michelle Tyreen Johnson. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. Audio assistance from Eric Matthews. And music by Allison Cross. For more information, to contact us, or to support Race Unwrapped, visit wfpl.org/raceunwrapped. From LPM, Louisville Public Media.